Oh, we are on the air. Okay. I thought like it used to ping at me until I would know how much like random shit I was
How,
doing before I went in.
how long have we been on the air?
I don't no just for like the end of my dancing.
Okay,
Um
all right, okay.
yeah, but it used to it used to ping at me so that I would be able to drag it out knowing how long I was dragging things out and making things awkward. But this time like now it doesn't even do that. So now I'm just like, is this awkward enough? Is this awkward enough? Oh, I'm live. Okay, shit. Like I've sort of brought it back on myself, probably deservedly.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note, welcome to the MMA Vivisection for UFC Rotterdam. I am Zane Simon. I am joined by my co-host Connor Rebush, who I would love to blame wholeheartedly for fucking up the flow and being late as shit.
I was only a couple minutes late.
But he was only a few minutes late, and then Google Hangouts is responsible for the rest of it. So,
Say what you will about Google. They always release stable programs and updates for those programs, and they never have issues with operating on a wide variety of systems.
never. Say what you will. We have not been fighting this same battle for years on end now.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so I apologize for those of you who have stuck with us for the past 25 minutes going, where the fuck is this show? You know, I planned my day around this, and I know most of you did, and now it's starting late. So, anyway, we're here to talk fights, fight picks, betting odds, all that good stuff for this Amsterdam card. Not Amsterdam, Rotterdam. I always just assume it's Amsterdam because why wouldn't you go to Amsterdam if you're in the Netherlands?
It's like Reykjavik in Iceland. Like, are there other cities?
Yeah.
Not that I know of.
This Rotterdam card. And I got to say, the weird thing for me that this card going in is that I took a look, and I don't know if you've looked yet, and if you haven't, don't. But I am picking every one of the favorites.
I'm not sure if I am or not, but I have a feeling that I am.
Yeah. It's one of those cards where like, yeah, okay, there are some arguments to be made. There are definitely some tough fights on here that I'm not 100% comfortable or happy with, but I just can't make myself pick even one underdog on this card.
There are definitely a few where I don't think the odds actually reflect the matchup.
Yes.
Even where the favorite should be favored, he's like way too heavily favored.
Yeah, I agree with that, but it doesn't have like I always because I never make my picks around the betting odds. I'm never like, okay, let me look at the betting odds and then make my fight picks. In fact, I usually don't even look at the odds until we're doing the show live. But this time I thought I'd glance at them after I'd gone through and figured out where I stood on everything, and it was just a little bit like I don't have an underdog to pick on this card, and that's kind of weird. So
yeah, that's kind of weird.
That brings us straight to the first fight. Ulka Sasaki and Willie Gates. What are your thoughts?
Well, Sasaki is stepping in on pretty short notice here. He is, who's he replacing? Patrick Holohan.
Yep, Patty Holohan.
Who had a rare blood disorder.
He's basically anemic. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
And so Sasaki makes the questionable decision to take a short notice fight against a dangerous finisher despite having lost his last two in a row. I hope that Yuta and his team do not expect doing this to save him should he lose, because I don't think the UFC values short notice step-ups as much as many fighters assume they do.
They don't. And he's also doing it down a division. So
yeah. Wow. Yeah. I just don't like this fight for Sasaki. Like, he's got tools, but he's not a very consistent fighter. He's okay in the clinch. He's really aggressive and really scrambly on the ground. But Gates is not easy to take down. He's especially not easy to close the distance on. He's actually got fairly good straight punching combinations. And he's not super consistent himself. He's kind of got a little bit of that Lorenz Larkin thing going on. But, you know, he's dangerous and he's still young and inexperienced. I think he's getting better. And we've seen against fighters like John Moraga how dangerous he can be given just a split second of opportunity. So, or even better against Darren Montague, who he absolutely destroyed. So, I think it's going to be Willie Gates by TKO.
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me is honestly, this fight just feels too similar to the Taylor Lapilus matchup.
Yeah, I
Gates
think
is Gates
it's
isn't as
like
technical, but
yeah, but he hits harder. I think, and I think he's
yeah,
more aggressive.
he hits harder. He's more aggressive. And there's like I watched that Lapilus fight, and in like the opening seconds of the fight, Sasaki was able to close Lapilus straight down, get him to the ground, and then Lapilus just stood straight back up and made the clinch game, and eventually was able to make the clinch game too hard and too taxing on Sasaki for him to be able to stay there for any length of time. And Sasaki then just got stuck at range, and the moment he got stuck at range, he was dead meat. And that just seems too easy and similar for Willie Gates. Like I watched Willie Gates fight with Dustin Ortiz. Dustin Ortiz came out, got him down, and Willie Gates just stood right back up. And Dustin Ortiz is a much better wrestler than Ulka Sasaki. And
Question.
Ortiz was able to then turn that constant clinch grind in his favor against Gates, but I don't see Sasaki being able to do what Ortiz does in the way he does it. And Ortiz isn't nearly as lost when he's out stuck at range.
Yeah.
So this just
Sasaki is just very stiff as a striker, isn't he?
He's very well. The thing is that he's very willing to just stay there and watch you and eat shots and get beat up in this feeling like I'm gonna have an opportunity sooner or later, even if you just tooling me for minutes on end.
Yeah, like a lot of Japanese fighters, he does not have a lot of defensive craft, and he really relies on having a big moment. He relies on grit, and he's very tough, but he definitely strikes and moves like a guy whose base discipline is not striking.
Yeah. He will just, in the Lapilus fight, he would just stand there with his hands down at the edge of range, waiting, getting popped with shots in the face, and then he'd dive in on a takedown, unset up from way outside, get stuffed, and end up back at range eating shots. And that just is not a recipe for success. So the odds on this fight, Willie Gates is favored minus 155, or minus 160 rather, down to minus 147. Sasaki is the underdog plus 135 down to plus 120. Gates isn't the most consistent fighter in the world. He's obviously lost regularly when he's faced high levels of competition. But I can't help feeling those odds are a little close.
I think they're a little short. I mean, I understand, like you said, not relying on Gates and so not putting a bunch of faith in him. But can you rely on Ulka Sasaki even half as much as you can Willie Gates? Willie Gates went to a split decision with Dustin Ortiz and knocked down John Moraga and knocked out still a very crafty flyweight in Daryl Montague. Ulka Sasaki has had no success in the UFC so far. So
yeah, other than choking Roland Delorme, who is massively underwhelming physical talent. And he beat Teruto Ishihara on the regionals. That's like the highlight of his career, and that's impressive. But
Ishihara is so young and inexperienced. Like he's only now starting to put his game together, and he's still wild. Even now, he's like twice as good as he was, and he's still a wild man.
And Gates at this point is 8 years into his career. He's very much coming into his own in the UFC, and it shows. He looks like a much more dangerous, much more comfortable fighter than he did in the past. Mm-hmm. That brings us to Leon Edwards versus Dominic Waters. Another replacement fight, I believe. Yeah, it was originally supposed to be Dominic Waters versus Peter Sabota. I don't know that I like that fight more for Waters.
I think it's better for Waters. Sabota's more of like an all-rounder who likes to grapple.
Yeah. Which fight is better for Waters?
I thought Sabota would have been better for Waters.
Yeah. I think Sabota would have been too. Sabota's generally a less dangerous striker where I don't know. I mean, the thing with Waters is I like him, but he doesn't have any dependable part of his game. Like for years coming up, and he's been around for a while now. I mean, it's not like Dominic Waters just started fighting. But for years coming up, he was most comfortable as a boxer. and his boxing craft is not deep.
It's okay. I mean, he's got decent defense and he counters pretty well, but yeah, it's not very deep. You know who he reminds me of, and it's not just because of the name similarity. He's like a longer Dominique Steele.
Yeah.
In that he's like no matter what phase he's in, he's kind of a grinder. And granted, I think Dominique Steele might have a little more gutsiness to him than Dominic Waters to him. We saw that in that fight with Danny Roberts.
Dom Steele, at the very least, too, is also like just got this massive physical bulk to him that he can kind of throw into people and make fights tough on them just because he's so big and grinding. Waters tends to be more longer, more drawn out, less physically imposing in that way. He's tall, but he doesn't have that physical dominance.
Although I will say, for having possibly the worst body language between rounds I've ever seen after the first round against George Sullivan, when he got rocked and beaten up for the last minute and a half, he survived remarkably well against a pretty mean, aggressive guy.
Waters is a gutsy guy, and I think that could serve him well in this fight because Edwards' problem tends to be that while he's got a very good, complete, and functional game, he gets worn out by if you're tough enough to survive, you can wear him out, and if you can wear him out, you can make his game fall apart.
Yeah.
And I don't think Waters can do that. He doesn't have the physicality quite, I think, to hurt Edwards and to stifle him, or the takedowns to really make Edwards have to overthink things. But that has got to be his path to victory because, like we saw in the Usman fight, Edwards is a better striker, and he was stuffing shots early, but Usman had the power to just hit him hard and to stay on him and eventually power him to the ground. And once he was able to start getting Edwards down, then Edwards became focused on takedowns. His striking got less active. He started getting hit more, and his game just kind of crumbled. And we saw the same thing even against Claudio Silva a bit. But
the funkiest fighter in this division.
The funkiest fighter in this division, absolutely. But I don't think Waters is that. I don't think I don't think his game is physically imposing enough to break down Edwards. So I got to give it to Edwards. And I don't know that Edwards is going to knock him out. I don't know that Edwards quite has the volume to do that, but I think Edwards will take a decision.
Yeah, I don't think Waters has the sheer weirdness and craft of Claudio Silva, and I don't think he definitely doesn't have the speed or the strength or explosiveness of Kamaru Usman, or the smoothness with which Usman blends his striking and his wrestling together. I think Edwards, and especially like in the beginning of that fight, Edwards' time at AKA really, really seemed to be paying off. Like his counter wrestling was better than it ever had been, and it needed to be against Usman. I think even though this is on short notice and he probably didn't have part of a camp at AKA this time around, having worked on that skill set will be a big help against Waters, whose only real hope here, I think, is to mix things up the way Usman did, to pressure, to counter Edwards every time he throws, and to mix those counters between strikes and takedowns. I just don't think Waters has the physical presence to make that kind of thing happen, nor does he have, like you said, I think he's got a decent game, and as far as all the pieces there make sense to be there. Like he'll defend and counter while pressuring so he doesn't open himself up too much, but the depth is not there. So when he defends, it's like put both hands up and duck your head. And that's why he got uppercutted by George Sullivan, and why he's been so easy to clip and so easy to take down, because once you get onto his rhythm, or you can start to draw very predictable reactions out of him. And I think Edwards is definitely sharp enough a striker to do that. So I think Edwards by a TKO feels about right, even on short notice.
It also doesn't help Waters that I think, he doesn't seem to have quite the awareness to not get drawn into his opponent's game. Like being in that Dong Young Kim fight and being like, I'll just clinch with him for a while. Yeah, it's like, no, don't do that. Yeah,
at least Leon Edwards, like, he knows he's not supposed to wrestle with you more than necessary. He knows he's supposed to angle off as fast as he can. Waters went in there and immediately tried to clinch with Dong Hyun Kim. It's not – I mean, he's young and inexperienced. I think he has potential, being such a well-rounder and being so tough. But it's not gonna get brought out if he keeps taking fights like this.
Yeah, definitely. So next up, oh wait, no, odds. Leon Edwards is the favorite, minus 230 down or up to minus 275. Dominic Waters, the underdog, plus 216 down to plus 175. And I think that feels about right. I think Leon Edwards is a deserved favorite. Wouldn't be heavier than that just because he's like we say, he's shown that there are ways to break his game, but a deserved favorite.
Yeah.
That next up, we've got the Fight Pass headliner Kyoji Horiguchi, Neil Seery. This is a good fight.
This is one of the best fights on the card by far.
Yeah.
Kyoji Horiguchi. Is it my go?
Yeah.
Kyoji Horiguchi has tons of potential, and the unfortunate reality with the flyweight division is that when you have tons of potential and you blow away all your early competition, you get thrown into a title shot with arguably the best fighter on the planet. And that is not an easy way to develop as a prospect. Fortunately, Horiguchi seems to have dealt with the aftermath, the crushing loss pretty well. He came back against Chico Camus, who should definitely still be in the UFC. Great gatekeeper, tough journeyman type fighter, and beat him almost more impressively than I thought he would. Like, he didn't really have any problems with Camus, and Camus is a guy who gave Cejudo problems. Camus tends to give everyone problems. And Neil Seery is kind of similar to Camus, which is why I like this fight so much, because I think Horiguchi needs more fights like this where he can afford to play around and try new things, but he's good enough at his base level that if he falls back on his skills, he should still be able to win. It's a tough enough matchup, but not too tough for his age and level of experience. Neil Seery, kind of like Camus, very dangerous boxer, a little weirder than Chico, a little less predictable, and maybe a better counterpuncher. He's got this awkward right hook that he likes to throw, and I think really that is one of the best things going for him in this fight. But I think the very best trait he has is the fact that he is a really, really game fighter. Anytime that you hit Neil Seery, he hits you back often with the exact same thing you just hit him with. He will up his aggression each time that you score. So you basically feel a bit of pain every single time you have a bit of success. And Horiguchi moves well. He likes a very long distance that doesn't suit Seery, but he does like to leap in. And as good as his timing is, he is counterable. He doesn't have a lot of defense built into those attacks. So if Seery can put enough pressure on him and make it dirty and hit him enough as he comes into attack, then I think Seery can make him very uncomfortable. But it is Horiguchi's fight to lose. I think he probably beats Neil Seery with a fairly one-sided decision if he fights smart. But it's also worth noting Seery has never ever been knocked out.
Yeah.
He's incredibly tough. He's surprisingly good defensively, but he also can just take a hell of a shot. So he will be there testing Horiguchi for all 3 rounds.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting, too, that most of his submission losses, except when he was fighting much heavier fighters, and most of his submission losses, I believe, have come to heavier fighters, but most of his submission losses have been kind of funky things, where, like, 2 knee bars and a triangle choke, where it's not necessarily stuff like... It's not like he's just getting backpacked and choked out, which is more the kind of thing that Horiguchi would be likely to do.
Yeah, it's like weird sudden scramble submissions.
Exactly. So I would not be surprised at all if Seery makes it to the final bell. However, the decision goes against him. Probably the best thing Seery has in his favor to me too, not only is his gameness, but the fact that he's just a very, very consistent output fighter. Like, he knows exactly what he needs to do to maintain pace in rounds and to stay in fights, and when he needs to do it and how to do it. It's kind of like, in that way, I guess I'd say he's a bit similar to Brad Pickett in that way, where it's just like, there's this sense where, Pickett, even if he's losing, he will always be right there working hard to maintain the rhythm of a fight.
That's why the fight between these two was so damn good.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think in that way, like, that's something that will help him against Horiguchi, who very much thrives on breaking rhythm and making fighters pause and wait on him. He has that long thing, and the reason he doesn't have to have a lot of defense too is, not only is he lunging in, but he's doing it at these really awkward times when fighters are just kind of, they're not sure what's coming or when. So that when he's lunging in from way outside to throw some huge shot, just fighters get frozen in the headlights. And I think Siri's got the kind of style where he's less likely to freeze than others would, just because of his attitude
and his experience. Like, at this point, it's pretty damn hard to overall Neil Siri.
Yeah, exactly. But I just don't see him being able to catch up with Horiguchi often enough to make that count and win rounds. Because Horiguchi, too, is tough as nails, so it's not like Horiguchi's likely to get caught out or TKO'd or submitted or anything like that. So it should just be one of those things where Horiguchi's able to duck in and out from range, pick him apart slowly, maybe eat a few shots, maybe get pressured a bit against the cage, and still ride out a fairly comfortable decision.
Yep.
Odds on this fight, Horiguchi is a heavy favorite, -500 to -625, or -635. Neil Siri, the underdog, +472 to +325. And it's hard to say that's long after I've basically been like, I think Horiguchi just rides out a fairly comfortable decision.
Yeah.
But I really want Neil Siri to do better than those odds. He's very capable of turning this into a close, ugly fight where even if he loses, he's in every round.
Especially because I think Siri packs a sneaky punch.
He does.
And I think, like, he could actually make Horiguchi more uncomfortable than most fighters he's faced, because with the timing on those counters, the willingness to engage in a gunfight, which Horiguchi doesn't really necessarily like to do, and that sneaky power, I think he could actually, because it's not like Horiguchi's facing anybody else who has really hit him back hard when he comes in to land his shots. But I also forgot to mention, I think Horiguchi's wrestling will probably be a pretty good advantage for him here to keep Siri from pressuring him too much.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that Horiguchi, too, he does that I really love to keep himself from getting in firefights is he's one of those fighters that will just physically push his opponent away. Yeah. Like, he'll jump in, throw a hard shot, and then he'll just shove his opponent.
I don't know why more people don't do it. It's like, it's a great idea. They can't hit you hard if they're falling backwards off balance.
Yeah.
It works.
It does, and he's really perfected it, and it's one of the big reasons that, like, not only is he breaking your rhythm and making you wait on him, but he will hit you, and then when you look to counter, he'll just shove you hard enough that you can't.
And as he gets better, I expect him to start hitting you more after he shoves you, like George Foreman style.
Totally. So Siri's definitely sneaky and good, and he knows how to make his game count at all times. Like, he knows how to get the best out of his game in every moment. And so I think he can do more against Horiguchi than people expect. Horiguchi's he's so funky. He's like the distillation of what all of those fighters on the Japanese scene that have these half-functional games. This is like what it looks like when it actually becomes functional.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Horiguchi and like Takanori Gomi in his prime. It's like this is what these funky ass fighters are all building towards. When like weird becomes something that works.
Yeah. I don't know why it doesn't happen more often per se with Japanese fighters. They just never shore up these holes in their game. But I think Horiguchi's definitely well on his way there. I mean, against most of this division, I'd say he's already arrived. Yeah. He's just got Mighty Mouse sitting at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings us to a lightweight bout, Fox Sports 1 opener, Jan Cabral versus Reza Madadi. And this is a tough fight to pick. I'm going with Jan Cabral from the outset. I'll just say that. But to say that Cabral has underwhelmed a bit in the UFC would be a little bit of an underwhelming statement. Like, he's got that classic sort of minimally it's like the classic high-level regional MMA game and low-level UFC game of being a strong kicker and an aggressive grappler. And
very rarely does that find consistent success.
Yeah, in the UFC, there tend to be way too many guys who are just going to stay out of range for your kicks or close you down and box you, and then can hang with you on the ground. And that seems to be what Cabral is finding, is that there are just every high-level fighter he faces can hang with him on the mat. And for a guy who's really lives and dies on his jiu-jitsu, that's a tough way to go. And I'm just not like, my only question there then is Reza Madadi actually a high-level UFC fighter at this point?
Yeah.
He was for a brief moment, like in his initial run up into that Michael Johnson fight, he had something going. But he was still on
PEH at the time. Performance enhancing handbags.
Oh, performance enhancing. Yes.
Yeah. He was feeding his habit. Now he can't. He got caught. So
that's right.
Post arrest, he's just not the same.
He's just not the same. He was getting that Louis Vuitton rubbed into his skin between rounds, and now everybody knows. They're watching.
Would say, hey, where's my coach? And they'd be like, he's right here. I'm like, no, the bag. Where's the coach purse? Damn it!
I have I don't even know that it's like, oh, he went to prison and became rusty because of it, because that seems a little simplistic. But I actually feel like he just kind of, like, his game aged out of MMA over that couple of years.
I think he's just one of those fighters who can overawe you, but once you see him against a few guys, you're like, wait a minute, I can beat this guy. It's like a Ronda Rousey kind of thing. Like, if you're not just stunned by these bursts of offense and everything, and you don't respect it, like Norman Park never looked like a better boxer than he did in that fight with Reza Madadi. He looked sharp, and Madadi had no idea how to deal with a pretty basic rangy boxing game. Yeah,
and he really just tries to out tough people on the feet. Yep. That is his striking style. Is you'll hit me, but I'm really tough. It's kind of like Ulka Sasaki, but with actual aggression to his striking. Like, Ulka Sasaki will just let you hit him, and then he will try to aggressively grapple. Reza Madadi will let you hit him and then try to aggressively strike, but mostly just lunge past you and let you hit him some more.
It's not super shocking, is it? I think Alexander Gustafsson's the only really good striker from that team. Isn't Madadi an all-star?
I believe he is.
He's got a
training center.
He's got a bit of an Alir Latifi style on the feet.
Yeah, he does. And unlike Latifi, he doesn't have the monstrous physicality to go with it. Like, he's a better wrestler than you think he is just looking at him. He is actually a pretty decent wrestler. And he's a decent grappler. And that's my only big question here, because I think Cabral can rattle off his high-powered kicking game at range against Madadi, who will be frozen and probably just try to mean mug his way through it. But the question is that when Madadi rushes into the clinch and starts to bully Cabral, and Cabral lets him go to the ground or goes to the ground with him or takes him down or gets taken down, can Cabral actually dominate Madadi on the mat? Like, I think he can. I want to say he can. But so far, now Yuki Kotani and David Mitchell are Jan Cabral's highlight UFC performances. And Zach Cummings and Johnny Case, who are both good stick-with-you grapplers, but not like amazing, upper echelon jiu-jitsu artists or jiu-jitsu grapplers, had no trouble hanging with Cabral every step of the way.
I will say, Cabral came pretty close to deserving 2 rounds in that Zach Cummings fight. He it wasn't the approach of a consistent, reliable fighter, but he definitely had some strong moments. He spent a good portion.
He has moments. I mean, he's definitely a good aggressive grappler. I'm not trying to suggest he doesn't have moments. It's just, are those moments enough to win rounds?
Yeah, that was his problem. Because like in that Zach Cummings fight, you might even come out of it and say, oh, Cabral is quite clearly the better grappler between these two. But in the end, he didn't win 2 of the 3 rounds.
Yeah. So I'm leaning Cabral, but that's my pick. I'm not gonna. I don't feel safe jumping in on Cabral. And when we lost Connor, as we always do, once per show. So hey, and he's back. All right, it's your turn to talk about this fight.
Ooh, what a relief! I'm more or less with you. I think it's a tough fight to call because neither guy is very reliable. Both guys, I think, are more confident in their striking than their actual level of skill merits. Cabral, he's got some decent, powerful kicks. He will throw a spinning elbow, and he can land it. He landed 2 spinning elbows on Zach Cummings, which is kind of crazy. He has this weird cobbled-together striking game that it's not that great, but he knows how to time his shots, and it's not terrible. And Madadi's is kind of similar. He spent a lot of time just kind of absorbing punches on his forearms or his face, and tends to only kind of fight in bursts, but they're pretty scary bursts. He'll throw some good combinations, and I think he packs a decent enough pop to make you respect him. So really it comes down to, since both guys are fairly equally matched in the feet, I think it really comes down to the ground game and the wrestling. And I'm not convinced that Reza Madadi is actually a better wrestler than Jan Cabral. He's pretty good. He'll go in for single legs really nicely. He has some good entries. But Cabral is pretty damn crafty in the clinch. He has a really nice takedown game, whether it's, leg attacks, trips, and foot sweeps and things like that, or even just like twisting clinch takedowns. He's got a variety of ways to get the fight to the ground. And he is one of the few guys in this division who has a good enough guard and sweep game that he can play off of his back for a moment and almost always end up getting a submission or a sweep out of it. He can, again, we've already said it's not winning him rounds a lot of the time, but to an extent, he can afford to play off of his back. And that's an unusual type of opponent for Madadi, because once Madadi gets on top, he's got a good front headlock game and all of that, but he's not like a devastating top position fighter or anything. And Cabral, I mean, the quickness with which Cabral laced up that triangle when he was fighting Zach Cummings was pretty impressive. So I think Cabral probably has the wrestling and then the jiu-jitsu to dominate this fight. He of the 2 fighters, he's basically the only one I see having a distinct advantage anywhere. So I'm basically banking on that, and I think it's Cabral by decision.
Yeah, I agree. It's just I wouldn't be comfortable putting any kind of bet on him.
No, it's a toss-up fight. I mean, I really feel like it is.
The odds on this fight, Cabral is the favorite, -171 down to -190. Reza Madadi +158 down to +140. Those odds feel pretty much exactly right to me. Slight edges for Cabral, no real edges for Madadi, but no trust in either of them.
Yeah.
And that brings us to Josh Emmett versus John Tuck.
Josh Emmett came in on a bit of short notice. What happened to Nick Hine? Do we know?
He slipped a disc in his back and tried to work through it and nearly ended up paralyzed. His arm started going numb on him, and he's now doing physical therapy to correct it and should be fine. But he, apparently really screwed up a disc in his back.
Well, I'm glad he's okay. It would have been a good fight, I think, between him and John Tuck. Now, just one of those where you feel like you have to go with John Tuck just based on the fact that he's had preparation. But Tuck was even a late replacement, wasn't he?
I think was expected. No, actually, I think this was just John Tuck versus Nick Hine from the outset.
So then that's the biggest advantage in John Tuck's favor. I think, he's one of those guys who he's like an Eric Silva, like he seems younger and less experienced than he is. He's 14-6. He's been fighting for like 8 or 9 years or something at this point. Not very prodigiously. He didn't fight at a great clip early in his career. Had some layoffs, but he's been doing it a while. I do still think he is improving a bit. His striking looks pretty solid in that fight. I mean, I think Tai Hyun Bang is a pretty solid fighter. And John Tuck, he beat him up, so that win counts for a good deal in my book. But if it weren't for the short notice, I think I would have to pick Josh Emmett over him. Like, that's the thing. Josh Emmett's a pretty he's an alpha male fighter, which always worries me these days because I don't know what the hell's going on at Team Alpha Male. But he's looked pretty good on the regional circuit. He's got some pop in his hands. I think the best thing going for him is that despite having a pretty aggressive style, he's more Andrei Feely than Uriah Faber. He throws a decent amount of volume. Changes up his targets pretty well. But despite that, he still went into the 5th round in this fight with Brandon Rossetti and looked okay. He didn't seem exhausted. I think his big problem here is, again, not going to have that preparation, so I don't know if he can do that because he fights aggressively. And the fact that Tuck is a very slick kicker, and Emmett counters kicks, but he doesn't really defend them that well. He fights out of this like lowered hand stance, bounce around. He's not a great defensive fighter. So I think he'd have a much stronger chance given a full camp. But the way it is, John Tuck. And I don't know if Tuck will be able to get Emmett to the ground that easily. But Tuck really does have a phenomenal ground game. So he definitely has an ace up his sleeve if that happens. It's just hard to pick a guy, even a promising prospect type of fighter on such short notice.
Yeah, well, this is weird to me because it's kind of like a bizarro match in that both guys are much older than they seem, than you would expect.
given their records and everything.
John Tuck he's 9-2 in his career, so he has really barely been fighting at all. But yeah, he's been around for 8 or 9 years, and he's 31. And Emmett hasn't been fighting for long at all. And he's coming out of Alpha Male, and you're like, oh yeah, Alpha Male, full of young dudes on the rise. He's a rising young dude. It's like, oh wait, he's 31.
He's like an old man at Team Alpha Male.
Yeah.
He looks older than Uriah, even though Uriah is several years older. Although I will say, that is a better recipe for success than a guy who's been fighting for ages, I think. Yeah. Like Edson Barboza's 30.
True.
But he's really just now hit his prime.
Yeah. No, it's true. I'm not saying that Emmett's too old or anything like that. I think he's got 6 or 7 years to continue working on his game.
Weirdly enough, he has more of the Dillashaw-esque style to his striking sometimes than he does the Faber one, even though he has largely come up in the post-Bang Ludwig era at Alpha Male.
Well, I think he's just he's kind of just a pure brawler out of Alpha Male, which is something you basically never see out of that camp. I mean, he's a dude who will just sit in front of you and throw however much of it, whatever he needs to throw until you go away. And he's got the fitness to do it because obviously it's a camp that trains fit fighters. They're not, that's one of the things you can always say about Alpha Male is that their physical prep's going to be on point.
They can scramble and they don't get tired.
Yep. He's fit, and I think he comes from a wrestling background, but it's like I said, it's kind of weird to me because Emmett comes from a wrestling background and all he really wants to do is brawl. And then Tuck, I think of him as this long-rangey striker, but you watch how his game is actually really developing, and what is developing is that he's much more willing than ever to wrestle.
Yeah, well, I mean, his ground game is what he should be gearing towards. Yeah. He's got he won the Abu Dhabi championships as a brown belt. He's got a really, really that brief moment when it went to the ground in that Tai Hyun Bang fight. It was like, oh, he is levels beyond where Bang and many other fighters are.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that he is a striker. It's just that's how I think of him. I think of him as this kickboxer, basically from Guam. But yeah, I think it's just Emmett's too unrefined. So, and even especially on short notice, I think that he'll give Tuck a lot of opportunities to pick him apart. He tends to come in with his head straight online, no head movement whatsoever, just kind of chucking things at you. And I think too that sets him up pretty nicely for reactive takedowns for Tuck, who's getting, like I say, better and better at that part of his game. And that leads to his grappling. And I just think Tuck's got too many advantages here, and Emmett's biggest advantages mostly revolve around being tough and high output, good cardio brawler. And that just doesn't seem like enough for me.
If he's the kind of guy who just stays in shape, and he very well could be, then I do think he has a shot here. Like, I'm happy to have Emmett in the UFC because I don't know. I people have this sense that being like a slugger or a brawler just can't work at the elite level when it's demonstrably untrue. Like, people are like, Justin Gaethje's all right in World Series of Fighting, but he'd never make it in the UFC. And I'm like, there are like 5 guys in the top 10 I would pick Justin Gaethje over right now. You know, if you're cut out for that style, then it can be really, really difficult for all but the most disciplined, calm fighters to deal with.
It's true. And the big thing here that would make me think about that with Tuck is watching that fight with Taiyan Bang. Like, Bong gave him a lot to work with early in that fight. Just a lot of space and room and time and potential to do whatever he wanted. And what Tuck ended up wanting to do was shoot for a takedown. Like, he kicked him a few times, and then he's kind of like, I don't really feel comfortable standing and working on this, so I'm just going to shoot for a takedown and take you down. And that worked. But if it doesn't work against Emmett, then it suggests to me that, like, you know, his striking isn't the part of his game that's really, like, where he's really getting more comfortable over time.
He did knock Bong down, right, with a right hand to set up the submission. I believe he did. He caught him exiting an exchange with a right hook. Yeah, and then jumped on his back. I'm not saying that his striking is bad. I'm just saying that, like, doesn't necessarily make him comfortable doing. And again, like, even with the wrestling and stuff, his game is not geared enough towards really pressing his advantages. Like, if you watch that Kevin Lee fight, that fight, when it was on the ground, it was still like, it was all John Tuck on the ground in the early going, and still he didn't really know how to make that phase happen a lot.
Yeah. So I'm picking him. I think he's a reasonably safe pick, especially over a guy on short notice. But it is interesting because it's also one of those things where, like, maybe he's still improving and he's still, like, he has these aspects of his game he's really good at, but he's been around long enough that I'm not expecting a huge leap out of John Tuck at this point. You know, the sport, he has been in this sport long enough to know what he's doing. On that note, there are not many odds for this fight because it just got made a couple days ago. John Tuck is a favorite, -144 to -150. Josh Emmett, the underdog, +110 to +116. I am actually a little bit shocked at how close those odds are. I would suggest maybe betting on John Tuck, since he's a pretty, like, it's not like he's a bad fighter or that he's just going to get knocked out or something. You know, he doesn't have a history of just getting brutally KO'd. His losses are basically to guys who can really put a grind on him. And I don't know that Emmett is that guy. Emmett's not, like I say, he's not really a wrestler. He's a brawler. He's not even so much of a grinder as he is somebody who just wants to try and constantly force a really action-heavy fight out of his opponent. Yeah,
and he's only really fought in California. He's flying over to the Netherlands on 4 days' notice. I mean, things are going to be a little different for him.
Yeah, so at 150 odds, or -144 odds, that seems like, I don't know, maybe not a safe bet, but it seems like a chance, an opportunity.
Where are the odds for that for you?
They're up near the top.
Oh, they have adjusted actually pretty heavily since I first opened the best fight odds window.
Oh, have they?
They were like -111, -111 and stuff like that, and they've already shifted. People are jumping on John Tuck.
Yeah. Well, now it's down to -120 and I'm seeing, actually now I reloaded it, and it's -130, 126, 130, 120. So they've actually gotten odds on Emmett. Emmett is at +104.
The one I was looking at, Emmett was a mutual favorite on like 3 of the lines. Now he's at least an underdog on all 4.
Wow. So
money coming in,
and it's coming in on Emmett. And that seems like a bad idea to me.
Yeah.
That
I mean, you look at his style. Like I said, I would bet him an underdog against John Tuck, definitely, if he was prepared. But on 4 days' notice, it's just hard to justify that.
I don't even know if I would. His striking is so defensively open, and it's not unlike Gaethje. It doesn't feel like it has the technical sharpness to it.
He's not as powerful as Gaethje either.
He's not as powerful as Gaethje either. So it really feels like the kind of thing to me where at a higher level, he's going to find that the guys who weren't cracking him for his huge defensive flaws are cracking him, and he's not able to get enough back just through pressure.
Yeah.
That's my worry with him. And until I see otherwise, I don't really have a lot of faith in it. But who knows? That brings us to Magnus Cedenblad versus Garreth McLellan. And I forget who's talking now. I think I am. Yes, I am. So, the biggest thing here, the biggest question I have is, what the fuck is Magnus Cedenblad going to look like? Because, I just saw an interview with him today where he was talking about how he tells people that there's no way to watch his old fights in the UFC. Like, if people are like, hey, oh, you're a UFC fighter? Can I see your fights anywhere? And he's like, no, you can't. They don't exist. Sorry. Because he hates how he looks in all of his old fights so much and thinks that he was such a trash fighter that he doesn't want anybody to see them at all.
Weird.
Which, to me, suggests highly somebody who is maybe going to come out trying a whole bunch of new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that does not necessarily put confidence in me. It does not instill me with confidence at all. But it doesn't. It's a huge question mark for him, because we know in the past that he was kind of one of these range kickers, submission grapplers, and he's fortunate enough to fight at middleweight, where that actually, like, any functional game, kind of gets you a lot of wins at middleweight. And he's a good aggressive grappler. He's big, and he's really tough, really, really tough. So that really makes a lot of his game more functional, and the fact that you're not going to hurt him easily on the feet, and then you're going to have to deal with this really clingy, scrambly grappler all over you.
Yeah.
It's very much a style set up to beat Garreth McLellan, who is a opportunist everywhere, and Garreth McLellan is a prime example of a fighter whose game is built off of the region he came up on, where it's like, yeah, he's got some power strikes that he'll just kind of throw out stuff wherever. He does a lot of, his clinch game is very much built on the idea that nobody's going to take him down while he's striking you in the clinch.
Yeah.
And his offensive wrestling is also based off the idea that you have no idea how to stop a takedown when he goes for one. And he kind of got lucky in his last fight when he fought Bubba Bush, and that he got an opponent who really had no offense other than the ability to take him down.
And no gas tank.
Yeah. So it's just like, okay, you've taken me down, and now I can just wait out until you can't take me down, and then I can start to beat the crap out of you.
Yeah.
And Magnus Cedenblad is not that fighter. McLellan is very willing to scramble and give up bad positions on the ground. He's willing to go for things and not play it safe. So it seems to me like if Cedenblad has any remnants of the game he used to have left going on, he'll submit Garreth McLellan.
Yeah, I will say for McLellan in that Bubba Bush fight, he did seem to work on a little bit of the stuff that had really, really troubled him against one of the many human fire hydrants.
Oh, yeah. Bartosz Babinski.
Yeah. The things that had really troubled him against Fabinski, because they had similar styles. And Bush tired, but I think McLellan made it a little more difficult for him to take him down. He seemed to have really, if not necessarily gained a bunch of technical savvy, he seemed to have at least renewed his focus on scrambling and not accepting bottom position, not accepting being on the ground. And then he actually got the chance to show later in that fight, second and third rounds, that he's actually pretty solid from top position. His control from top is I'm sorry, my phone's vibrating on the mic stand. His control from top position is not what you might expect for a guy who seems pretty lackluster in every other grappling department.
Yeah.
So with ring rust, I like this fight for Magnus Cedenblad because I know McLellan is tough and he continues fighting for 3 rounds straight, and he does not accept the idea that he's losing. He's always looking for that opportunity. And Cedenblad's been out for a long time now. I think it's been 2 years since his last win, his last fight. So, and if Cedenblad, as you suggest, comes in with a much different game, I mean, judging by his Instagram, he's working a lot on head kicks. I don't know.
That wouldn't be actually a much different game, but
yeah, it was a lot of head kicks, like a lot of just single right head kicks. But as long as he still knows that he can get to the clinch and put you in a front headlock and grind you out on the ground, then this fight is his. But and he's really good at that. And his wins, even as far as like journeyman middleweight wins go, they're good ones. Scott Askham and Krzysztof Yatko are both really solid wins. So I think if he gets McLellan to the clinch, he will have a lot more success than either Fabinski or Bush did. But if he tries new things and if he feels uncomfortable with his distance, the way that like Khabib and John Jones seem to after their layoffs, then McLellan could give him some tough times early on. I do think Cedenblad gets a submission at some point, though.
Yeah, it just seems like I was watching that Bubba Bush fight, and there's a point, where McLellan in his journey to get back to his feet just kind of rolled over and turtled and stayed there for like 15 seconds, and Bubba Bush had no idea what to do with it. And I was thinking, if this is Cedenblad, he's just he will be glued to you and with a hand under your neck at this point.
Yeah, you're either getting guillotined or rear naked choked or something like that.
Yeah. That brings us to Rustam Khabilov versus Chris Wade, and this is a good fight.
Mm-hmm. Now, Khabilov is a late replacement, right?
Yes, for Rashid Magomedov, who I know.
Oh, I so wish I want to see him back in the octagon. I forgot, and he got hurt.
He got hurt, and it was like a knee injury or something, and so it's one of those things where knee injury, which makes me super unhappy.
He said it wouldn't be that long. He did say it would only be like 8 weeks or something before he was healthy again. So maybe it's just like a meniscus and not like a major tendon tear.
Yeah.
But that's a bummer. Magomedov is amazing. He's like my favorite lightweight right now. So this is still a good fight though. And the fact that Khabilov accepted it on short notice makes me feel a sense of encouragement for his chances here because Wade is a very solid, very well-rounded fighter. He's kind of the wrestler who kicks to a degree, but his wrestling is so good and so multi-layered that he can really make that style work. He can move around at range and throw kicks at you, and then your response is, all right, I'm just going to punch him if he keeps kicking me, and then he takes you down. And he's got great chain wrestling. Yep. Probably a little better than Khabilov's, or at least a little more nuanced than Khabilov's. He's got more positions he can go to. Khabilov is largely like get in on a single or double, duck under, and spin around to the rear waist cinch, throw you on your head. Like that's kind of his chain wrestling. He's very good at it.
Once Khabilov has his hands around your waist, then he has a lot of chain wrestling to the back.
Yeah, but most of his chain wrestling up to that point is based on getting to that position.
Yeah.
Whereas Wade is like all manner of singles, doubles, and foot sweeps and trips and throws and just anything. So, he'll hit like lateral drops and shit like that and does it well. So that makes him an interesting opponent for Khabilov. I will say I think Khabilov, he's low volume, but he's actually a pretty good boxer. If you watch his mechanics and the way that he selects his shots, he strikes very intelligently. He likes to move around from range. He keeps a stiff jab out there. He doesn't throw it a lot and measure a lot, but when he steps in, he really makes you feel and respect that jab. He's got a solid left hook that he likes to play off of it, and he uses the jab to set up right hands, uppercuts, and overhands. He mixes those up fairly well. If he threw more, I get the sense he'd be more impressive, but at the very least, he's got good mechanics. He knows what he's doing. And he knows how to set other things up, like when he used the left hook against Masvidal to set up the wheel kick he has a few tricks up his sleeve at range. So I think he probably has the advantage there, but may not have it in the wrestling, which is the weird thing, because that's usually where Khabilov has the strong advantage, is in the wrestling. And it may not be that way. It may even be like the Norman Park fight, where Khabilov had some issues in the grappling as the fight wore on. Difficult to take the guy down, difficult not to get taken down and put on your back. So, I don't know, man. I keep thinking of like that Ben Henderson fight where like Khabilov, he had his moments, but Wade's a better offensive wrestler, or at least a more consistent one than Ben Henderson. And Henderson still managed to outposition Khabilov on the ground as that fight went on. So I'm thinking of this, and it kind of feels like it should be Khabilov, but on short notice,
that short a notice, I would say.
It's like 4 weeks, something like that.
I think it. Let's see, was
5 weeks,
3/11. So it's just it's about a month.
Okay.
Or no, it's actually, that was 3/11, so it's a month and a half.
Okay. Yeah.
But my kind of rule of thumb is anything outside of 3 weeks, I don't really consider short notice.
Unless you're John Jones. Depends.
Yeah, unless you're John Jones. But in general, I kind of figure most fighters, if they're getting at least 3 weeks, they're going to have some semblance of a game ready.
I don't know, man. Wade's pretty precise with his striking. He throws a little more than Khabilov. He's got really good timing on those takedown entries. I think if he sees Khabilov coming in with an overhand right, he could very easily put him down. And as good a scrambler as Khabilov is, like, I have seen him out-wrestled and out-positioned on the ground. Like I said, I just don't think there's as much depth to Khabilov's game as there is to Wade's, especially with the grappling. So I'm going to go with Wade. Why not? I'm going to pick Chris Wade.
I think the big thing that comes down to for me here is pure athletic gifts, honestly. And that is where I work. Like, that's a big difference for me between Chris Wade and Ben Henderson.
Sure.
Like, Ben Henderson is a really phenomenal athlete.
Yeah.
And Chris Wade is a competitive athlete. But the story of a lot of his fights has generally been, you will run over me, but the deeper we get into things, my technique will shine through. Like that Christos-Giagos fight, Giagos had, he took Wade down, he landed the bigger, more powerful shots. He did a lot of the heavier, like more physically dominating work in the fight, but then he would try to wrestle and grapple with Wade, and anytime that went past like 10 seconds, he would end up getting swept onto his back and just wrestled into the mat.
He's so much more aggressive than Khabilov, though. That's the thing. Like, if Khabilov threw more, then I would say he's an easy pick for me in this fight. But
the thing with that is, like, with the Giagos fight, like, that aggression just kind of gave Wade more opportunities to be more physically dominant. Or to be more technically dominant, rather.
Like, it could be more difficult for a counter fighter if you only throw once in a blue moon. Yeah,
because Wade's thing with his takedowns, most of them are reactive. Like, I went back and watched that Mehdi Baghdad fight, and it was actually a bit different. Because that, to me, was like a big step forward for him. Because, like, that's where he actually, without needing to duck under, was able to hit a big takedown that wasn't reactive. Because in the past, Wade's problem in the Zhang Lipang fight, in the Christos-Giagos fight, in his other fights has been, if you are not throwing yourself at him, he's actually not a very powerful takedown artist.
Sure, yeah.
He has trouble getting you to the mat. And then I watched that Baghdad fight, and he went in on a double, and immediately ended up in a high underhooks. Got immediately pushed up, and then was able to actually do a body lock throw takedown to get Baghdad to the mat. And that's the kind of thing where, like, I don't actually know that would work against Rustam Khabilov. Like, it worked against Mehdi Baghdad, but Baghdad is not a very good takedown defender. He's a single level takedown defender.
Yeah.
He has the ability to stuff that first shot, and then if you do anything more advanced, it's just not going to happen. And so without that against Khabilov, I kind of question whether he's going to be able to get the same kind of advantages that Henderson got. Like, Khabilov is unquestionably a more technical wrestler than Christos Giagos. So is he technical enough that when he has advantages, he's not just going to give up positions to Chris Wade?
Yeah.
And Chris Wade, he is the more high-volume kickboxer, but he's not a powerful kickboxer at all. He's very much light on your feet, stick and move, throw things at range, kind of slap at you, and stay in fights that way. He's not going to just overrun you. And I think because of that, because of the physicality, really, I'm going to have to go with Khabilov. I think while his wrestling isn't deeper, he's just so much more powerful. And he's technical enough that I don't think Wade is going to be able to run through his technical game like he's able to do against either worse athletes or less technical athletes.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm picking Khabilov. Odds here. Let's see, where is this fight? Khabilov is the favorite, minus 190 down to minus 215. Chris Wade, the underdog, plus 180 down to plus 155. I might even say that those odds are a bit long on Khabilov, a little bit. I mean, Wade's on a hell of a roll. He's got a really nice technical game, and neither guy is a proven finisher.
It's true, yeah.
When you so at that point, both of them are very, very likely to get a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, true. They feel within the realm of reason, at least. I mean, I expect Khabilov to be favored.
Way outside.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting fight. I'm really excited for it. My real hope, and I'm a little dismayed because Chris Wade was like, well, I know that I think I'm a much better kickboxer than him, so I'm going to try and out kickbox him, basically. Like that was Wade's theory.
Boy, I hope that's a bluff. That he's saying that in case Khabilov does a little research. And he immediately goes for a shot.
I hope that's a bluff too, because the last thing I want to see is a kickboxing match between Rustam Khabilov and Chris Wade.
Yeah, basically. I want to see some fucking suplexes, goddammit.
I want to see 15 minutes of like pure Russia versus America wrestling.
That'd be amazing. Yeah.
That's all I want to see.
I want to see Russian Sambo and wrestling versus American submission wrestling. I want to see that all day.
Yeah. So that is my hope, that we just get a pure wrestling match out of this fight.
Do you think Chris Wade is one of the many Long Island guys who would really benefit from working with a guy like Mark Henry and like polishing up his boxing and his cage craft?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think that Wade's kickboxing, he's done it a lot, and it's obvious that he's like kind of comfortable with it, but it feels like a lot of fundamentals without any actual refinement.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a mile wide and an inch deep kind of thing, where it's like he actually has all like these technical basics, so he's not narrow, he's not really confined, but there's not a lot of snap and polish to it. I mean, it's kind of the Bisping kickboxing game, which the lighter weight you get to, it becomes a much the lighter weight you are, the much more difficult it is to be Michael Bisping.
He's kind of like Chris Weidman, who is working with Mark Henry now. Solid fundamentals, but after a while, you want to start seeing something a little more than just a good jab and a good straight right.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. Chris Wade is interesting because I keep feeling like he's better than I think he was, and then I keep second guessing that.
Yeah.
Like that Zhang Li Peng fight kind of took a lot of the steam off of him for me. That and his Azmat Dugulubgov fight back on regionals kind of really pumped the brakes for me on him. And then he's been performing well. You know, he beat Christos Giagos, he beat Mehdi Baghdad, and I'm like, yeah, maybe there's really something there. And I'm like, yeah, maybe there's not. I don't know. I don't know. I keep second guessing myself with him. So we'll see. Next up, Fox Sports 1 main card, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Heather Jo Clark. And I don't know. I'm going to keep this simple and say I'm going with Kowalkiewicz. Her game just seems much more polished everywhere, and is much less based on being overpowering and aggressive. And Heather Clark just seems like, unless she's got a decided physical advantage, or she's facing somebody who's just really unskilled, it doesn't seem like she's going to win. And Kowalkiewicz does not seem, I don't know that Kowalkiewicz is ever going to be a top 5 athlete for that division, but she's just too polished and too well-rounded and keeps her head on her shoulders too well.
Yeah, unfortunately, she keeps her head right between her two shoulders a little more than I would like.
Yeah.
But, I think this fight's fairly interesting, actually. I think Heather Jo Clark, she's tough. She's a pretty solid counterpuncher.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't move your head and you have predictable timing coming in, she can clip you with the right hand. She's a little similar on the feet to Randa Marcos, who Kowalkiewicz had a pretty close fight with last time, just not quite as aggressive and definitely more reliant on making the ground game work. She's got really good control on the ground. Her positional control from the back against Rowdy Beck Rawlings was very good. Her back control was phenomenal in that fight, threatening arm bars, rear naked chokes, and getting really high up on the back without actually being shaken off. She's very confident. Ooh. And what's that? Did you not expect the dogs are going apeshit over there? The thing with Karolina, Zane is getting to me. The thing with Karolina Kowalkiewicz is she is a hell of a round winner, even though there are a lot of areas of her game that technically leave something to be desired. Kowalkiewicz has this weird habit of coming in with her head straight up, and then she pulls back in these odd angles, like just constantly collapsing her stance. She always seems like she's a split second or a hair away from being knocked down by being caught off balance, but she also knows what she's doing. She comes in with these weird throwaway punch combinations, very little involvement between her lower body and upper body when she strikes. Like, it's all just kind of like Holly Holm. She moves in and she just arm punches the hell out of you and then gets out in a different angle. But she's a round winner. She throws a lot of volume. Every fight is a dog fight for her because she's always getting in close and has to land a ton of punches to seal her round. So she's there to be hit and there to be grappled with. But she's surprisingly consistent regardless. And I think the best thing that I saw in that Randa Marcos fight, because I do think Kowalkiewicz was very anxious going into that bout. She really didn't look like herself in the first round. And then when it kind of became a dogfight, she got a little more comfortable. I think the best thing I saw in that was how well she adapted from a pretty lackluster first round to a really solid second round. She came out and she was way more aggressive with her kicks. She started mixing up her strikes a lot more. As the fight went on, she got visibly more comfortable with her range, started timing Marcos's punches rather than getting timed on her own. But still, I don't think Kowalkiewicz, she's not that strong. She's not that explosive or powerful at all, and she every fight she fights to a level of her competition. So that's why I think it's really hard to say that she's going to be like a consistent top 5 fighter or something, but she just keeps winning. And the best things you can say about her, she knows how to win rounds, and she can go for rounds and rounds on end.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, is that in a division where very few fighters are going to get KO'd, you're not going to see a lot of knockouts. You're not even necessarily going to see a lot of submissions. I mean, you'll see submissions at the typical rate, but submissions don't tend to be the major ender of fights these days. But where you're not going to see a lot of knockouts, you're going to see a lot of decisions. The ability to just be a consistent round winner makes her an instant sort of borderline top 10 talent.
Yeah.
And Clark does not have that. There's no part of her game that I feel is truly dependable. She's not a great wrestler. You know, her back control was decent in that Rawlings fight, but she also let Rawlings off the hook repeatedly. And
she got really tired in the third round, which is kind of the nail in the coffin. Like, that could actually lead to Kowalkiewicz knocking her out just by piling on volume. Because if Kowalkiewicz has like a flat-footed, exhausted body in front of her, she's going to hit it 100 times in that round.
Yeah, and Clark, you know, while she can land some good, sharp, powerful counters, she doesn't do it at nearly enough rate to actually hurt people. You know, it's like, oh, that stopped me in my tracks for a second, but you're not following up with it, so I'll just keep coming right after you. And her technique her mechanics aren't bad, but the actual, like, technical makeup of her striking is, you know? Like, what actually comes when it comes to putting together combinations and striking in a way that is intelligent and sensible, it just doesn't seem like it happens. So I feel like Kowalkiewicz, you know, there may actually be more technical problems with her, like with how she holds her head and her stance and her disconnect and her physicality. But the actual, like, setup of her combination striking and that kind of thing is a lot sounder.
We're basically talking around it while desperately trying to avoid our favorite word, but it's process versus
it is process, yeah.
No process. That's what it is. A strategic fighter versus a less strategic fighter.
And Kowalkiewicz is the favorite, minus 243 to minus 295. Heather Jo Clark, plus 231 down to plus 185. Those are probably a little long, just considering how Kowalkiewicz tends to fight down to her opponents, and the fact that Clark is probably consistently getting a little bit better right now. But it's also worth knowing that Clark has not fought for 2 years, for a year and a half.
Has it been that long?
Yeah, her only fight in the UFC is the tough finale against Bec Rawlings.
Wow.
So. And I don't even know what it's been since. I mean, I'm sure she had an injury or something, but I haven't even seen her have, like, a scheduled fight to pull out of or anything like that. So it's hard to say what exactly she's going to come out with for this fight. And if she is rusty at all, then that's not going to be good for her.
Yeah. And, okay. Kowalkiewicz has been fighting at a pretty regular clip.
Yeah. She stays busy. And that brings us to the people's main event, Nikki Thrills versus Francimar Barroso.
I know everyone loves Nikita Krylov. I just want everyone to step outside the joke for a moment and acknowledge that Nikki Thrills is not that good.
Don't spoil the moment, Connor.
He's really not. Like, this is a fight between two not good light heavyweights. It really is. Like, Nikita Krylov, look at Nikita Krylov's record and tell me that anything about it seems reliable.
You're killing me here.
It's like every single win is in the first round, largely over people you've never heard of or who have like no UFC wins or whatever. The only time he's ever gone out of the first round was when he had the worst heavyweight fight of all time with Soa Palele. A fight which he could have won if he wasn't such like a crazy, like if Nikita Krylov came into that fight, Soa Palele is dead tired. He has a rib injury. Krylov comes out in the second round. He's like, wow, this guy's fading. What should I do? Should I try to, as a stick of a heavyweight who really should be a light heavyweight, knock out this 265-pound monster? Or should I keep him at range and just pick him apart because he's exhausted? He just upended his gas tank right over Soa Palele's head. Like, that was his method. He tried to drown him.
He tried to light him on fire. He tried to cover him in his own gasoline.
Yeah.
And he
had such a strong advantage and jumped on it so foolishly with so much earnest that he ended up getting knocked out because he was dead tired. Like, he could have easily won that fight. And I have no reason to believe that he has overcome that trait, that he has overcome that. And then when you look at the kinds of, like, Nikita Krylov's, the vast majority of his wins are by submission, but it's all like key locks and ankle locks and stuff.
I don't know how you don't love this.
I love it, but I just want to say, realistically, I cannot ever count on that. And I think I can count on Francimar Barroso more. Like, he is dead boring. He's not ever fun to watch fight. But he definitely did fine in that fight with Elvis Mitopcic, like so much better than I thought he would.
He did. He did actually look way better in that fight.
Yeah, he actually had a little more volume. It was still like single shots, but like Jackson Winklejohn style, he mixed up the targets and changed up what he was throwing and what he was attacking well enough to keep a pretty good defensive fighter in Mitopcic from ever taking over. So I'm picking Francimar Barroso because here's the thing. Nikita Krylov knocks him out in the first round, and Barroso he's been knocked out 3 times, but it's been some time since that's happened, and it was by harder hitters than Krylov. Or Barroso like runs through him with some ridiculous freight train takedown, and like as long as Barroso gets to the second round, I think his chances of winning this fight skyrocket. Like what does Nikita Krylov do well outside of blowing someone's head off in the first round?
You know what? That's the wrong question to ask. That's exactly the wrong question to ask.
Not when picking fights. When enjoying them, it's the wrong question.
But, I mean, I think the thing with Nikita Krylov that has to be kind of recognized is that like if OSP is a testament to how far a fighter can get on nothing but athletic ability.
Yeah.
Krylov is a testament to how far a fighter can get with nothing but intangibles.
Yeah.
Like, nothing else at all but these random other things that are completely outside the realm of what we consider main MMA tenets.
Yeah. I mean, I know I teased the weirdness of the types of his submissions, but it's amazing that he has submission wins at all. Because anytime you see Nikita Krylov on the ground, he's not a good grappler.
No.
Like, he's not. He goes for the weirdest shit at the weirdest times. He doesn't have good control. How is he submitting so many fighters? How does it keep happening?
I mean, he won his last fight by submission.
He won his last 2 by submission.
Yeah, his last 2 by submission.
Oh, God.
The thing with Krylov is that he, the intangibles are being like, he's a legit size light heavyweight, and to his, to his own better judgment. Now that since he's been training in Russia a lot more, and eventually even just getting out of Donbass and eastern Ukraine, he seems to have gotten on a much better strength and conditioning program. So he is actually a legit sized light heavyweight now.
He could have been a middleweight when he made his UFC debut.
Yeah, he could have been a middleweight when he made his UFC debut. Now he's 6'3" and very firmly 205 pounds. Like in that fight against Rogerio de Lima, he didn't look as big as de Lima because de Lima's fucking massive.
Yeah.
But he looked a lot bigger, a lot stronger, a lot more powerful. And so he's big and strong and has absolutely unchecked aggression.
Yep.
And he is fearless and he is tough as shit. Like,
yep.
And these are all like his intangible skills that have nothing to do with technical ability or, gas tank or style matchups or anything like that. It's just...
And I think maybe because some of his success can be attributed to the fact that he has a really eclectic toolkit too.
Yeah.
Nobody expected him to go into that Walt Harris fight and just kick Harris's head off in the first 20 seconds. So he can surprise you with either his submissions or his striking arsenal.
And that is the one thing he is legitimately good at is kicking. Like, yeah. He is a powerful kicker.
Mm-hmm.
And a good one. Like, he will just throw kicks at all angles, from all angles, at any time, without any, even like, not even without setup, but without any tell. Like, you never know when and where his kicks are coming and where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is the thing. Like, the thing with that Barroso fight, he did look good. And I think
I mean, he didn't look good. He looked good for Barroso.
he looked good for himself, and he looked like a more. The big thing is that his kicks had a lot more pop and power behind them than they looked like they'd had in the past. It was less like I'm just throwing my leg part of my body at you, and more like I'm actually snapping out this kick with good form.
Yeah, I think that was Mutapcic's biggest problem. Like, he had to respect what Barroso was throwing at him.
And the thing with Mutapcic too was just like, I think Barroso is also a very legit size light heavyweight, and it just put some fear in Mutapcic. Early, it was just this massive power divide that for the rest of the fight, even like you could see Mutapcic had opportunities. Barroso's only throwing one shot at a time, and he's not throwing them very often. And Mutapcic was able to, and Mutapcic, he had a lot of fear of getting taken down. But as the fight went on, he was stuffing everything too. Like, he wasn't getting taken down. He just had nothing to respond with. He was unwilling to commit to any of his strikes.
Oh no. Krylov has no fear. We all know this.
We know that Krylov has no fear. Like, that's the thing, is that Krylov, he's not going to get scared off of his game. And
for better or for worse.
Yeah, for better or for worse. And I don't trust Barroso to match an actual high pace, Like, I don't trust him to not get caught and get hurt or get overwhelmed if somebody's actually going after him.
Yeah.
That is my problem. I mean, this is a dude that lost a split decision to Hans Stringer.
That was a horrible fight, too. That was one of the worst fights I've ever had the displeasure of witnessing.
It was a terrible fight.
It wasn't even as fun as, like, other terrible fights like Dan Kelly versus Patrick Walsh. It wasn't even entertaining bad. It was just dull.
And the only other fights Barroso has in the UFC are against the master of low output, low volume performance, Ryan Jimmo. Elvis Mutapcic, who basically got scared off of a striking game. And Ednaldo Oliveira. And if you remember that fight, it consisted entirely of Barroso backing up in circles and Ednaldo Oliveira being too slow and too unring savvy to cut him off in any way, shape, or form.
I think that's Krylov too, though. At least Krylov's going to be more aggressive.
Krylov is so much faster, though.
Yeah,
He's so much faster than Oliveira. I mean, Oliveira's nickname is Squidward for a reason, and it's not because
I don't even know what that reason is, but
it's because it looks like Squidward. And because he's this lanky, overly drawn-out, noodly fighter that is just going to, slow pace himself with weird, awkward aggression around the cage.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying. I think Krylov wins the first round no matter what. But, the party-pooping curmudgeon in me who doesn't understand rap music really wants to see the terribly uninteresting Francimar Barroso just beat up everybody's ironic favorite. I really want that to happen.
All right. Well, while you're crapping all over my fun, I'm picking Nikki Thrills. And so is the rest of the just and right-thinking world. Nikita Krylov is the favorite, minus 160 up to minus 230. He is getting minus 230 odds.
He shouldn't, by the way. I think we can both agree he should not.
Minus 160 feels right.
Sure, yeah. I think I will be, come Sunday, I will be literally the only person on the planet rooting for Francimar Barroso.
You probably will.
Only
Maybe his
one.
mom. And
Not
his mom
even
will be
her.
like, "Oh, son, why are you so boring? I will pick this crazy Ukrainian."
She's like, this Al Capone fellow is fun.
That's right. So Barroso's the underdog, plus 170 down to plus 130. It's basically a coin flip fight. Quite frankly, every Nikita Krylov fight against anyone outside of the top 5 of that division is going to be a coin flip fight. And that's just how bad light heavyweight is.
Yeah.
I mean, if Nikita Krylov fought Shogun Rua, how confident would you be in Shogun winning?
50%. Yeah. You know what, man? I would love to see Nikki Thrills fight the guy who just lost to Misha Serkinov, Alex Nicholson.
Alex Nicholson. Unfortunately, Nicholson, that scared him down to middleweight.
But man, that would be a fun brawl, wouldn't it?
It would be a super fun brawl. Nicholson is, I think, making the wrong decision, also being a 6'3", 6'4" dude, and deciding to drop down to
middleweight's harder than light heavyweight.
And Serkinov, you should not take that as the baseline. Oh yeah, every dude at light heavyweight is as big as Misha Serkinov.
No, every dude at light heavyweight can't grapple nearly that well either.
No. Anyway, that brings us to Germaine de Randamie versus Anna Elmose, and I'm gonna pick Germaine de Randamie. She's much more experienced. She's not coming in on short notice. She's generally reasonably been tough. Mm-hmm. She's a very technical striker, and she looked like she'd tightened up her game and looked good in her last fight. Albeit her last fight was against one of the worst athletes in her division, Larissa Pacheco. And Anna Elmose is undersized, but is not the worst athlete that bantamweight has ever seen. And
she's far more comfortable closing the distance and striking. Pacheco is woefully uncomfortable in the striking exchange.
Yeah. I do think this is, however, a somewhat of a trap fight for de Randamie, because Elmose comes with power, and she's one of the rare fighters in that division that can consistently throw with reasonable form. Throw power shots and with consistent form, because de Randamie, she's such a slow-paced fighter. It is her tragedy, and when she tries to, the reason being, when she tries to open up, she gets taken down immediately. She has never figured out how to integrate active takedown defense into an offensive game. But so, I think she'll give Elmose a lot of time and space and opportunity to throw power. And that could make this a bad fight for her. That could mean that de Randamie gets bullied like she got bullied against Julie Kedzie a lot. And Kedzie does not throw with the kind of power that Elmose does at all. So I think there's a chance de Randamie wins, but just the size factor, Elmose is going to be one of the smallest women bantamweights on the roster, and the technical advantages and all that. And Elmose isn't any kind of wrestler or grappler to note at all. So I have to pick de Randamie, because usually it's getting taken down and beaten up on the ground that causes her all of her problems. So
yeah, it's I'm pretty much with you all the way. This feels a lot more like a toss-up than I imagine the odds reflect. Elmose she's inexperienced, but she's also at that stage where she could make a lot of improvements in a short amount of time. And de Randamie is basically, I think, done making dramatic improvements. She's 32. She's been kickboxing for ages and been doing MMA for several years now. Yeah, she's been doing it since 2008. Not super consistently, but she's been doing it for a while.
That's long enough. It's enough time in the gym. She knows the sport and how it works.
She has her game. I will say she did look, because against Pacheco, I don't think she was that worried about the takedown. I think she opened up a little more. And Elmose has not been a takedown artist so far, so I think Randamie will feel free to throw a little more volume, to throw more kicks in particular. Will be really good for her with her size, and the fact that Elmose she likes to counter kicks, but she doesn't really defend them all that well. She'll take them in order to respond. And the other thing is Elmose likes to go into the clinch. She gets there really aggressively early in fights, and I think de Randamie's got to have the edge there, just because she's got the Muay Thai background and her height. She's got a 6-inch reach advantage or something, like height advantage. Elmose is very short, so that's got to favor de Randamie with her knees and things like that. And but as the fight goes on, Elmose tends to kind of settle into a more comfortable range. I've seen her dive into the clinch early in fights, but when she can't bully the person, then she will get them into the fence, and she'll stay there right at that critical distance and keep their back pinned to the fence while she looks for openings. She's a lot more dangerous there, and she names fighters like Mike Zambidis and David Tua as her her inspirations, and you can see it. Like, she's got good hands. She throws good combinations. She'll attack the head and the body with both hands. So if Randamie doesn't throw enough volume, and if she doesn't overwhelm Elmose in the clinch early, then I think Anna Elmose has a good shot. And I think she's a really nice addition to this division because she's young and she has a lot of potential, even only having had 3 pro fights over 2 years.
Unfortunately, she's not young, but she does have a lot of good potential. She's like 31.
Oh, is she? Okay. Well, still, like I said before, 31 with only 2 years of experience. I like that more than I.
Especially in women's MMA, where like the shelf life, like the athletes age out a lot slower. Like the shelf life isn't longer, but the time in which you can be competitive is longer. I would say because there's just not that much. There's not that much athletic parity. So you know, even if you're losing a step athletically, there aren't enough really good athletes around you. This
might be a weird question, but it is said that women sexually mature after men. Is it possible that because of like what that might have to do with hormones, that women athletically mature later than men? Is that possible? I mean, I know it's just kind of a vague question, but
it is a very weird question to ask me. Oh, yeah.
The expert on these things, Zane. Tell me. You've been with a lot of older women. Tell me, Zane.
It is a very weird question. I do not know. I would. My gut feeling is no. My gut feeling is that there's a reason that like great women gymnasts and tennis players tend to be teenagers and early 20s and age out like every other sport.
Yeah.
Where we see women have a really deep technical, athletic, competitive field, they tend to age out just the same way men do.
Yeah, but there are like at strawweight, who just fought Carla Esparza? Lima. She's Juliana pretty old, Lima. And she still looks like a pretty good athlete. We've got.
I think in women's MMA, it's different because it's just like
because the depth of skill is not there, like the talent pool's not there.
Yeah, and just because too, like MMA in general has always been a sport that covers for aging really well. Like you have way more opportunity to age gracefully in MMA than almost any other sport because you can find so many ways to cover.
That makes sense.
Those gaps. It's like, I'm getting a little slower. I'll focus more on wrestling, and
Sure, like Dan Henderson becoming like 3 different fighters over the course of his career.
Exactly. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be my theory on it. Now we have and the odds on that fight are highly outsized to my feeling. Germaine de Randamie is a favorite, minus 345 to minus 420. Anna Elmose, the underdog, plus 348 down to plus 260. And Germaine de Randamie has done nothing to prove that she deserves that kind of favoritism. Mm-hmm. That's what it really comes down to.
Yeah, those are a little long for me. They're significantly long for me, actually. I mean, I think de Randamie definitely should be the favorite, but
yeah. But she has never been proven. She's never proven herself a consistent winner. So that brings us to Albert Tumenov versus Gunnar Nelson.
Can Nelson beat Tumenov? That was the question of the week for heavy hands. And I don't know.
Are his hands good enough to beat Tumenov?
I don't know. Are they quick enough? Does he have enough focus? Do you know? To beat Tumenov in one go, is tough. So I think I think Einstein has to be the favorite here. I like Gunnar Nelson's game. If we talk about process a lot, and Tumenov is not like the most process-driven fighter in the world. He's pretty organic, but he's definitely more so than Gunnar Nelson, who it just annoys me when I watch that Rick Story fight, which is a great fight, by the way, really good fight to watch, but the commentary annoys me for 2 reasons. A, Dan Hardy, John Gooden, really, really hyped about Gunnar Nelson, even as he's handily losing the fight. But also they keep talking about how he's like, oh, style without style. Don't prepare for your opponent. Like, don't do this. And like it's some kind of like mystical higher Like, I talked to a guy like Mark Henry on Heavy Hands, and he's like, oh, I have my fighters, my young fighters, and the round doesn't end until they've thrown 3 body shots and 3 5-shot combinations and 20 jabs. Like, he's like insisting on having this gamesmanship mentality because it's a sport and you got to win rounds. So, like, to pretend like Gunnar Nelson, a martial artist among athletes, no, I'm sorry, it's not a good approach to MMA. It's just not reliable.
No.
And it's pretty remarkable how well Gunnar Nelson's done despite that. You know, he's very talented. He's really dangerous. He's got some pop in his hands. He's got pretty tricky timing. He covers distance quickly. He's surprisingly strong and crafty in the clinch. And even though I don't think he's like got great chain wrestling, he can hit a reactive takedown really well. And then on the ground, you know, his top control is fantastic. Thing is, he has not improved. He's basically reached a level where that was his style when he came into the UFC, and it's not changed. He still relies entirely on his hands and his feet for defense. He needs to parry or he needs to step back, which means he will throw the occasional cross counter, but largely it's difficult for him to counter when you push volume on him. And because he's always jumping out of range or committing his hands to defending himself rather than being able to hit you back. And then when he does come in, he comes in standing up straight, and he does all these weird esoteric ways of entering the pocket, and so then he gets hit off balance, like when Rick Story clobbered him and put him on his back, just because Nelson was not aware of his position or his distance. And he doesn't throw a lot of volume, and like Tumenov is just such a good combination striker. He's among the very best in MMA right now. The way he puts his punches and his kicks and his knees and his elbows and his takedowns, all of this stuff together, he's a very good transitional fighter. And he's had some tough matchups. Musoke was a tough fight at first. Lorenz Larkin gave him some trouble, but he has adapted to those. Whereas Gunnar Nelson has had his tough matchups, and even though he's won a few, they've been against a lesser level of competition. And even when he's won them, he didn't really do it by adapting. He just kind of did it by out-toughing the other person. Like, he didn't really adapt to Rick's Story at all. And before that, he fought. Do you remember how close his fight with Jorge Santiago was?
That was an incredibly close fight.
Santiago hit him a lot, and Santiago was the second to last fight of his long career. He was definitely at the end of his run. And he got a lot of shots off early on in that fight, and Nelson just kind of outlasted him and just kept going. And you got to give credit to his toughness and his chin and his confidence, but that is not a way to beat a power punching, organic striker like Tumenov. So I think Tumenov will knock him out.
Tumenov's definitely going to be coming for him.
Maybe not knock him out. He's very tough. He'll be coming for him. He will be coming for him, and hard.
But I mean, you can kind of tell in MMA how big an MMA hipster somebody is by how often that they have given the distinct impression that they feel Gunnar Nelson is the second coming of Christ. Like, there have been points in Nelson's career where, like, every Dan Hardy looking dude, of which I probably can count myself among them, has fawned heavily over Gunnar Nelson as the next, like, welterweight, lightweight, whatever he wants champion who will change the sport forever. And,
right. Well, look at even the hype he was getting going into the Damian Maia fight. Like, was he favored in that fight?
He might have been. I
think he may have been. They're like, oh, he's younger and he's got, like, Damian Maia's never faced a guy with jiu-jitsu like this, and Maia just kind of came in and out-muscled him and completely out jiu-jitsu.
He was favored in that fight.
Yeah, like, that's weird. Why?
Yeah, I think I was at least smart enough to not pick him in that fight.
I definitely didn't. I'm like, man, Damian Maia is criminally underrated, and I guess that's the reason Nelson was favored. But, like, Nelson just doesn't have the game to beat consistent elite fighters.
Yeah. And what we've seen with Tumenov, slowly but surely, is the biggest problem in his game going forward is going to be his lack of kicking defense and his his interest in just walking through kicking your kicks, a kick attack. Like Lorenz Larkin, who Tumenov really had handled dead to rights, nearly won, and he did it only off a kicking game.
Yeah. Because he was really uncomfortable exchanging punches. He really was.
Yeah. And Nelson does not have that game. Nelson is not a high-volume kicker. He's not a bad one, but he tends to want to box. Like that, he tends to keep too wide a stance to be a functional kicker, honestly. Like, it's really hard to throw a lot of fast, powerful kicks when you are in a wide sort of karate stance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can throw some of them, and you can throw a lot of quick ones, depending, but I don't know. Like, generally when I see guys with a wide stance like that I tend to think that they're not going to do a lot of kicking.
No, they want to move linearly back and forth, and they want to punch. It's hard. It takes more energy to get a kick going out of that low stance, and it's a little easier to see coming from further away.
Yeah, it's stupid to say because obviously karate is full of kicking, but you don't see a lot of really successful, I don't know, like the karate kicking thing with MMA, it's always got a weird jive to it.
Well, if you look at like the best kickers in karate, they're like Kyokushin guys, and they stand like Thai fighters.
Yeah.
Kyokushin guys generally don't fight out of that deep Shotokan stance.
It's true.
Or Gyoji-Ryu, I think, is what Gunnar Nelson has trained. He is a powerful kicker, but he just doesn't do it a lot.
Yeah, he doesn't do it a lot. He doesn't do it enough to make it turn the tide against Tumenov. And Tumenov, since that ill-fated Ildemar Alcantara fight, which will be a stain on his record for probably his entire career, he seems to have really figured out the fundamentals of takedown defense in the U.S. version of MMA.
Mm-hmm.
And Gunnar Nelson, he's a good takedown artist, but he's not a impossible takedown artist. Like he's not the kind of guy who's just going to run through you and put you on your ass over and over again. He's somebody that, given the time, if he can find the right point where you have off balanced yourself, he's great at coming in with a body lock foot trip that will put you on your back.
Mm-hmm.
Or, getting in on a single leg and turning it into a dump or something like that he can do well. But it's not the kind of deep technical wrestling game where you're like, oh shit, Gunnar Nelson, got in on a single leg and now it's only a matter of time before this dude's on his back.
Not like a Damian Maia wrestling game, for example.
Not like Damian Maia. So, I kind of see a lot of this fight happening on the feet, and if a lot of it happens on the feet, it's really, really hard not to favor Tumenov to win. I mean, we've seen, I thought at the time, I kind of thought the Brandon Thatch fight was like a really big step for Nelson, but in retrospect, what we've seen from Thatch since then is that is not at all the case.
Yeah, and it was like that's the kind of thing Nelson can always do. He's always been really good at jumping in. Like when he fought Akhmedov, when he fought Cummings, like he has that fight changing ability, and that's why he's been able to get away with having the style without style or whatever his goofy philosophy on MMA is because he's a really good opportunist, but. Like, you need some ways to create those opportunities, I think, against a guy like Tumenov. And
Tumenov is a decidedly better striker than anyone that Gunnar Nelson has beat or faced at this point. He's a better striker than anyone Gunnar Nelson has fought in his whole career.
Yeah, both defensively and offensively. And I think it bears, not to make excuses for him, because I'll probably at some point start sounding towards Tumenov like Dan Hardy sounded towards Gunnar Nelson, but he's only 24 years old as of December. And like the Ildemar Alcantara fight, it's only been 2 years since, and I think he's markedly better at stopping takedowns. And Alcantara was a former light heavyweight.
No, I mean, there are always a lot that go into that kind of thing. It's not hellaciously damning, especially because Tumenov was lighting Alcantara up before he gassed himself out and then got kind of grapple fucked for the rest of the fight.
Yeah.
But it's just the kind of thing where you're like, that's still like, it's still hard to look at that loss and be
it's hard to look at him like top prospect, lost to the boring Alcantara brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A deeper reading of it unveils a lot more sense in it, but it's still just one of those things. So on that note, Albert Tumenov is the favorite, minus 175 up to minus 190. And Gunnar Nelson, the underdog, plus 169 down to plus 145. I mean, those odds might be a little. I hate to say those odds are narrow because Gunnar Nelson is a very good fighter with a lot of respect, and I like him and all that. But he's going to kind of have to show a lot more to beat Albert Tumenov.
I think you should also factor in here too. I mean, I think now that I'm saying that those odds are too narrow, now Gunnar Nelson's going to go and knock Tumenov out or something like that. But I think you also have to consider what the effect on Gunnar Nelson's psyche and his passion for the sport may be now that he's gone in there and had the ace up his sleeve just ripped to shreds in front of his eyes by being like backpacked by Damian Maia for 3 rounds. Like, how do you go in there as a guy who always has his jiu-jitsu to fall back on and just get nothing done in a fight? It's got to be a blow.
The other side of this coin is, though, that Gunnar Nelson is probably the best wrestler that Albert Tumenov has ever faced, with the potential exception of Anthony Lapsley, who's not nearly as good a fighter as Gunnar Nelson.
Yeah, and Lapsley was running scared for that fight.
Yeah, so this is a big test of the market improvements we've seen in Tumenov's counter wrestling game. And those improvements have been marked. Like he looks like he's falling into line with like the Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Rashid Magomedov line of just superior next level takedown defense focus. Mm-hmm. But this is the first time that he's really going to have to test that out.
True. Yeah. Good point.
So perhaps that's a good reason that the lines are as close as they are. It just feels like Nelson has never been a guy who just goes out and creates takedowns over and over again. That's not how he fights. That's not what he did that's not what he's done against anyone. He either wins because he was able to get one takedown, like against Akhmadov or DeMarcus Johnson, and they weren't able to do anything with it, or he was able to capitalize on one mistake from them, or he has fights like the one he had with Jorge Santiago, or the fight he had with Zach Cummings, or the fight he had with Rick Story, or the fight he had with Damian Maia, where he's just kind of gotten stuck for really, really long stretches on the feet, and he either sinks or swims there. Mm-hmm. So, because you don't see that takedown machine aspect out of him, surviving on his feet against Tumenov seems like a dim proposition.
Yeah.
That brings us to Antonio Silva versus Stefan Struve. Struve's going to win this, and he's going to knock Antonio Silva out early. Off to you, Connor.
Boy, I don't know if I can pick it that confidently. Like this, Struve definitely should have more potential at this point in his career. But he was so gun-shy in that fight with Jared Rosholt. Like, Rosholt has this weird ability to make every opponent as timid as him. Oh, so like when he's slinging leather, he gets knocked out by Alexei Oleinik. But when he doesn't want to throw a single punch per round, neither does his opponent. So I don't know.
Antonio Silva does not have that ability, though, to make people timid.
Yeah, he doesn't have the wrestling of Rosholt, which I think is probably what had Struve so anxious, is that he really didn't want to get put in his back. It also is heartening. I mean, Struve is definitely younger. He's been in the game a long time, but he's as a heavyweight at just 28, he's still got to have more potential than Antonio Silva, who, without the TRT that he has a very good reason for using, is not the same fighter. And I read in the MMA Fighting's morning report, which had a little interview in it with Stefan Struve, that he has been putting a concerted effort into training back his killer instinct. Like, he said he dropped a ton of people in sparring in his training camp, and that his coaches were always on him to like hunt someone down and increase his volume when he had someone hurt, So hopefully he can overcome that problem he had against Rochelle, which hasn't really been a problem for him in any other fights. So that's why it worries me, because after he had the anxiety attack thing with his, and I guess he's had some serious anxiety since the Mark Hunt fight. That's what I heard from him, is that like his body failed him in that fight. He was too exhausted to do anything, and like he's been really nervous about that happening again. And so maybe that's what the real thing was in the Rochelle fight, is he didn't want to get engaged in a slugfest because he's worried that his body won't be able to keep up. So hopefully he's overcome that. If he has, he should still have more speed, and there were some genuine improvements in his distance management in his fight with Nogueira. So if he can bring the killer instinct back and keep making those technical improvements with Henry Hooft, then I think he should be favored here. But boy, it's easy to see. Like, you know what the most damning statistic of this fight is? Both of these guys have lost all but one. Each has 8 losses, and each has lost all but one of those by a finish. So, like, they both get knocked out a lot.
Yeah, the difference generally, however, is that for Struve, other than, like, Struve's big knockout losses have tended to come to, like, super high power punchers, basically.
Overeem, Hunt, Nelson.
Yeah, Overeem, Hunt, and Brown with a Superman punch, and Roy Nelson. And Silva, Daniel Cormier's not a bad puncher, but he's not.
I don't know, Velasquez, Arlovski, Hunt, like those aren't bad, And he also went 5 rounds with Mark Hunt.
He went 5 rounds with Mark Hunt when he had a chin,
and when he was juicing. So
yeah, but the Antonio Silva of late is a dude who gets dusted by Frank Mir in the first round.
Yeah, that's my feeling too.
He almost got slept by Soa Palele. Like, he came really close to getting knocked out by Soa Palele.
Yeah.
And if ever there's a dude who does not, like, I realize Soa Palele has a long history of knockouts, but if you look really closely at those, you will find the hidden theme in them.
I don't know. I thought his knockout of Bob Sapp was a real humdinger.
Yeah. I mean, Palele tends to be like, he gets on top of you, and then he's just so immovable, and he can generate so much force from being on top of you. He's not a, like, I hit you once and you fell over kind of knockout artist.
Right.
And, I mean, just Struve in general, like, I think Struve has more of a chin. Like, he can take more of a licking, win or lose right now. So it's like he's fragile and he's unconfident, and I don't think either of these guys should frankly be fighting in a perfect world.
Yeah.
Neither of them should be fighting, but I trust Struve to take a beating for a round before getting knocked out at this point, and I don't trust Antonio Silva to take a beating for a round before getting knocked out.
I gotta wonder if Struve's health is worse because of it. Like, getting sparked out by single shots has kind of been shown to not be as bad for your long-term health as absorbing a ton of punishment.
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder if maybe that's why we're having such a sharp down spike here, even though he's not 30 yet, because he did have a lot of back and forth. Like, he had hit a lot when he fought Miocic. He got hit a fair amount in the Pat Barry fight. He got hit a lot when he fought Christian Moorcraft back in 2010.
He's hit a lot.
Paul Buentello, like, he's had a lot more back and forth wars that he has survived, but more and more lately, like Bigfoot, he's not been able to survive those wars anymore. He's not been able to rely on his chin to get him through as much.
Yeah. I just think that he can still rely on it more than Bigfoot can, and at that point, I got to give him the edge. Like, I just don't. Antonio Silva looks like a guy who, in that Mark Hunt fight, and I realize it's Mark Hunt, but it was literally like, okay, we're waiting for the moment when Mark Hunt hits you once, and then the fight's going to be over.
with like not even a clean punch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have no faith in Silva. I don't have much in Struve, but that's why I'm so willing to make that pick so cleanly.
Stefan Struve is firmly a gicht, as Eugene Robinson would say, but Antonio Silva definitely feels like a gichta. Guy I can't trust anymore.
Yeah, very much. Struve is the favorite, minus 189 up to minus 220. Antonio Silva, the underdog, plus 186 to plus 150. Those are perfect odds. Neither fighter, no heavyweight fight should ever be more than plus or minus 200 in any direction. Oh, reminder, I forgot to say it at the beginning, and I said I would say it every show from now on. Do not bet on heavyweight fights. Just don't.
I made the mistake of betting on Cody East, and look what happened.
Do not bet on heavyweight fights. The dude who bet $500 on some heavyweight because we sounded confident in him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do not do this thing.
And if you do, don't hold us accountable, because we are just saying, like, and especially, like, no, when I make bets and I'm like, I'm going to put a bet on this, the biggest bet I've ever made was $10. Like, I don't bet a lot of money. Never, ever bet more than you can afford to lose. If you're okay with throwing $500 out the window, then by all means do whatever you want. But it's still, like, on heavyweight, less good than any other division to do that.
Yeah. Do not take big bets on heavyweights because they will so often disappoint you. And that brings us to the main event. Alistair Overeem versus Andrei Arlovski. Take it away.
These guys seem so similar in so many ways, right? This fight feels at the outset like it could be a coin flip, because we have two old heavyweights who have kind of found a bit of unreliable new life late in their careers, kind of changed their styles with success late in their careers. Arlovski's 37, Overeem is 36. Both guys have a lot of knockouts, and Overeem has a lot of submissions, more so than Arlovski, but both guys are big finishers, and both guys have been finished a lot. Both guys have, I don't think either of them really has a bad chin, but both of them have human chins in a division of titans. So, they've been sparked out a lot by these big hitters. I think Overeem's chin is probably actually a little better than Arlovski's, but I think Overeem has had more problems with self-confidence than Arlovski. And so Overeem has had a lot of tendency to quit in the past. Throughout his career, he has, not quite as much as his brother Valentine, but he has not wanted to. He has...
Valentine Overeem is like MMA quit personified.
Yes. Yeah, he's not that bad, so he definitely got the heart in that family, but he still has a bit of the issue where, like, the Shogun fight, the Chuck Liddell fight, there are others.
The Travis Brown fight. There are more fights where Overeem has started incredibly well and then had things go slightly against him and fall into pieces than you can count.
Yes, but that is why I like Overeem's change of style so much. He has tried this kind of style a bit in the past. He actually tried it against Bigfoot. He did pretty well. I think that fight he genuinely just got caught. Like, it happens. Yep. He was doing well in that fight. He was maybe a little too cocky with his hands down, hanging his chin out there when he's not that great of a defensive fighter. So, but, he did it successfully against Frank Mir. The Ben Rothwell fight, he got caught. But for 3 fights in a row now, he has done really well with this outside, rangy, outboxing kind of style. And I think it's great because if Alistair Overeem is, as I suspect, a bully at heart, if he has this kind of front-runner's bully mentality, then there's a certain logic to him wanting to indulge that and run you over in the first minute of the fight. And he has done that to a lot of solid fighters. He could have gotten a stoppage over Travis Brown, for example. Nobody would have complained if Travis Brown had been saved when he was getting battered on the ground. But that means that if you have that bully mentality, that as soon as you get tired and you see the guy hasn't gone away, your insecurities are going to start gnawing at you, and you're going to start to get hurt and get scared off. And so Overeem now is a fighter who can still feel like he is like this badass who is picking you apart, but he gets to pick his spots, and he gets to, use his speed and his power and not put himself at risk of being hurt or being scared off in any way. So like in the Junior Dos Santos fight, he didn't do anything huge in the first round of that fight, but he came into the second round looking fine. He was completely comfortable. Likewise for the Roy Nelson fight, the Frank Mir fight. He went through all the rounds of those fights without any real changes in momentum or tempo. A few scary moments here and there, but it's heavyweight, and he's dealt with those scary moments better than he has in the past. So that's a big step up for him. He's basically a guy who has gone away from the pared down Dutch style to his benefit as an older fighter. And Arlovski's kind of the opposite. Arlovski used to be a lot more aggressive, and he's also pulled back on the aggression, but he has also pared down his skill set where he's really like a counter right hand and little else now. And it's a good right hand. And the fact that he has chosen to also be kind of an outside fighter is also good for him because he can draw his opponents in. He's still one of the fastest heavyweights in the division at 37 years old. He is very sprightly on his feet, and he covers distance, and his hands are really quick too. So I think it works for him, but that means he's going to give Overeem space to work, and he's going to, like Overeem. And even Brandon Gibson said this when he was on Heavy Hands. He said he's a neutral party. He's not cornering either of these guys because obviously both of them are Jackson Winklejohn fighters. But he did say, I don't want to give out strategy or anything, but I think both guys have defensive flaws that could be shored up. And I think that Overeem's style is better equipped to find those defensive flaws in this matchup than Arlovski's is, because Arlovski needs to defend in order to let that counter right hand go. And his defense isn't that deep. He doesn't have that many ways of stopping you from hitting him. And Overeem's got a lot of variety and unpredictability and different angles and different ways in which he covers distance and throws his attacks. So it would not at all shock me if Arlovski caught Overeem on the chin with a right hand coming in and put him out. But I think the safer bet in this fight, and again, it's heavyweight, but the safer bet is Alistair Overeem.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me, my reading on it is basically the hyper distilled version of everything you just said, which is that both of these fighters are going to be very comfortable to give each other a lot of space.
Yeah.
But in that space, Alistair Overeem is actually dangerous.
Sure.
Like what we saw out of Andrei Arlovski, given a lot of space and time, is his fight with Frank Mir, where he just sat and looked at each other.
Or the fight with Brendan Schaub, very similar.
Yeah. Or the fight with Brendan Schaub, where they just looked at each other. And it's like when Arlovski tends to still be honestly dangerous is when guys really come after him.
Yeah.
And then his hand speed and his technical skill really come into play.
How crazy is it that Andrei Arlovski has had much better performances over Travis Brown and Anthony Johnson than he has against Frank Mir and Brendan Schaub?
I know.
In the span of 3 years. Like, how is it possible to look better against those great fighters?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I think it really comes down to when fighters come after Arlovski. That really gives him more. It gives him more to work with.
Yes, it's all about the style matchup for him.
Yeah. Whereas Overeem, if you give him that space and that time, then he can really make things happen. That really lets him be the creative fighter he wants to be right now. And so I really just feel like this is just a little too perfectly set up for him in that way, that he's really going to get the opportunities he wants. And it might look something like the Junior Dos Santos fight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it'll probably be fairly similar, actually.
Yeah. So we could be talking about Overeem via KO. And
more likely to get the KO this time, too, because that's JDS we're talking about. This is the guy who has like 10 knockout losses.
Yeah. And once again, don't bet on heavyweights. Please don't bet on heavyweights. Overeem got clipped a fair few times by Roy Nelson coming in on him with offense and hurt. But Roy Nelson did not have the fitness or speed or ability any longer to follow up and actually continue to hurt Alistair Overeem.
Yeah. He got hurt more by Roy Nelson than he did Junior Dos Santos in a boxing exchange. This is why you don't bet on a heavyweight. You can never fully predict what's going to happen in the fight. No one would ever look at these records and say, all of these results make sense.
Yeah.
They don't.
They don't. So, nonetheless, Overeem feels like a reasonable favorite. He is at minus 215 to minus 240. Andrei Arlovski plus 206 down to plus 175. And I'm glad to see these odds because, like I say, with heavyweights, they should never be that far apart. Plus 200 feels like my max unless you're just talking about Cain Velasquez versus Walt Harris or something.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, that just feels reasonable to me. I think they're going to spend a lot of time circling from the outside, and right now, circling from the outside gives Alistair Overeem everything he needs. So, any closing feeling on this? Any picks that you're really feeling?
For betting suggestions, I would say, again, avoid the heavyweights. And I would say I don't think Willie Gates is a bad bet at around minus 150. I think that who else did I have my eye on? I think Francimar Barroso, like I'll put a little chance bet, but he's close to plus 200. I don't think that's bad because those odds are way too wide for what a weird fight that is. And if you're really feeling frisky, I think you could put a small bet on Anna Elmose. She's a plus 348 underdog on one of these books.
I also think John Tuck at minus 120.
And Albert Tumenov. He's closing in on minus 200, but even then, I think he's a really heavy favorite to win that fight. And I personally got him at minus 170, which I was pretty happy with. So if these odds close up a little bit, then I think Tumenov is pretty much the strongest favorite on this card, even in that fight, except maybe Kyoji Horiguchi.
Yeah.
Whose odds are not tempting at all.
No. All right. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSim. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush.
You forget my name just then, Zane?
No, I didn't.
The late guy.
That guy on Twitter at BoxingBush, BUSCH. You can find both of us over on Bloody Elbow. Subscribe to MMANation.com as DOTCOM over on YouTube. That's where you can find all our other analysis, videos, shows, interviews, all that good shit. Give us a like. That's a thumbs up. That helps us a ton. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.